should be it. Have to do the thing again where we check. Let's have a look here. It's got to be an easier way to this, but I don't know what it is. But every time I start a live stream, I don't really know whether or not it's actually worked. Which means I have to go to my own channel on my phone, go to view channel, and look at that. It appears that I am live. So I can see it. Drone Phobia. Kez, mate. How are you, buddy? It's been a long time. A month tomorrow since I've done one of these. So I thought it was about time. Just let me do my logging in, all that jazz. Is that it? So we've got some comments and whatnot to answer, but I've actually just gone through because there was a month worth of them. So I went through a bunch of them, answered them already, so I've kind of left some of the more interesting ones. I was just flicking through Instagram, looking at some surf stuff. Oh, that's OXS. We have OXS in Shapers Collective. I kind of want to get into this a little more, with skimboarding. Seems like if you can skate a bowl, you can do that, and I can skate a bowl, so I should be able to do that in theory. I just watched one of the most infuriating videos of a professional ding repairer fixing customers' boards and filming it and putting it on Instagram with solar res and a UV torch, epoxy boards, quite expensive epoxy boards. Kind of bragging about it, I guess, and then finishing it off with a 240 grit sanding job and some rubbish spray paints from the local hardware store. That made me mad, I'm not going to lie. So I thought it'd be cool. I was actually doing this because I was like, oh, I could sort of flick through my Instagram and we could talk about things that are going on, but I don't know if that's a good idea because I kind of get angry at some of the things I see and I might offend people. Not this though. That is a sick board. Yeah. There's some good shit on Instagram for sure. Anyway, it looks like we've got some people. How's it going, crew? Let me pull this up so I can actually see some stuff. Let me know if the sound is no good or if I need to turn it up or down or anything like that. Hopefully it's alright. And we'll get stuck into some of these comments. Like I said, there was a month's worth, so I've been through a heap of them. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 left. They were sort of the more interesting ones. There were so many comments and it would have taken hours to do this. It's been kind of busy. I already spoke to the members about it in a video yesterday. I'm hoping... Yeah, you guys should be able to hear me, right? So we had a tornado. I've got this tab open here. So this is actually at the bottom of the hill to the left here. That's my street there. So this tornado just came at 3 in the morning and I was actually in here editing at 3 in the morning, and then we had a power cut. I couldn't do any audio because it was so windy and my blinds, my windows are like glass slats, so they don't quite close, they're always a little bit open. So the blinds were blowing around, so I couldn't do any audio work, so I was just cutting footage. Then we had a power cut. I was like, well, I better go to bed. It's 3 in the morning. And then when I kind of grabbed all my stuff to go inside and turned my phone torch on, I noticed that both of my blinds were being sucked outwards, which is weird because there's a window over that end and there's a window here, so one blind should be blowing this way, one should be going that way, but they were both sucked to the windows outside. And then I went to open the door to walk outside, and I got blown back inside the sleep out. The door slammed shut, and I waited a little while and then managed to get out. The wind, it was still windy, but it had died down, but it was like a 3-minute, what I thought was a 3-minute gust of wind, and I was thinking it was weird. But yeah, it was a tornado, just one street over, just absolutely destroying houses and trees and cars and all kinds of stuff. I actually haven't read this article, so yeah, there we go. But yeah, that's at the end of my street right here. Whole road was cut off. This is the end of my street. That's my street right there. It was absolute chaos. Never seen anything like it. So spent the whole day there. That's the buddy Tom Cuddy. He's a roofer helping out. So spent the day pulling trampolines out of living rooms and finding people's valuables, like pictures and that type of stuff, and pulled a couple of couches out of a house that had lost a portion of its roof because they thought there was going to be rain later that day as well. Cut up some trees that had fallen on cars, and just spent the day doing that type of stuff. And just the amount of like, that's corrugated iron in trees, but my old boss, who you can actually see it, I think these little orange blobs here are insulation. And there too, all these orange bits maybe. So my old boss lives at the bottom of this road. He has a macadamia orchard, and I went to his house. He was out of town, but went to go make sure his house was okay. And all of his macadamia trees were just thick with housing insulation, which was pretty wild. You can even see it in the corner of this photo here. So yeah, cleanup continues. It's still going, but nobody died, which is really good. Some poor lady was sucked out of her bedroom, which was on the second story of her house. So she was sucked outside, woke up kind of on the roof of her house. But the neighbours heard her screaming, and they came out, and they were propping up her roof with like bits of other people's houses that had blown into her yard. Crazy. That's the one there. So that was her bedroom there. I think that's the house. So she got sucked out onto like this part of the roof, which was then collapsing. So the neighbours were propping it up with 2x4s and things like that. Nuts. So yeah, not the kind of thing that happens very often. And then, on a happier note, we had Bowl Bash Saturday. So this is an annual competition at our local skate park. So we had that, which was pretty epic. We had the first 900 ever done on a concrete bowl during a competition. Was done by a 10-year-old child. So that was pretty sick. The kids were ripping, the chicks were ripping, the old guys were ripping, the opens were ripping. It was an epic day. Super cool. So that happened. So it's just been busy. And so I haven't had a chance to do one of these live streams, but I do have to kind of get on top of it more because these comments do build up quite fast. So anyway, that's that. We may as well get into them and have a look at what people have been saying. So this one from Wenerai. How do I do open image in a new... Nope, that was not it. Let's see if we can... I can't do that, so I'll just have to click it. So this is a comment on a video with a flax inlay. Just in case you're wondering, so this is quite an old video, an old short. I do have a video on it, but this is a short from that video. So this is a flax inlay. It's the only one I've ever done for house surfboards, but it came out quite cool, and he still surfs this board today. It's his favourite one. He actually took it to England with him last year as well, and Spain, I think he went, or Portugal, maybe both, one or the other. So this board's now travelled the world too. Cool board, fun material to work with. So our buddy here, what have I done? Our buddy here, Wenere. Hope I'm saying that right. He asks, is the harakeke a cloth? That's flax in Te Reo Mori. Is the harakeke a cloth? Does it add strength? That looks mean. Where do you get it? So it does. Sorry, I was just reading the comments. I'll get to that. Is the flax a cloth? Does it add strength? That looks mean. Where do you get it? So it does add strength. It's very thick compared to fiberglass. It's not as thick as a Hessian sack, but still pretty thick. So it definitely adds strength, adds a little bit of weight, but I would dare say it adds more strength than weight, based on zero science at all. And I get it from Shapers Australia, but there's probably a bunch of places you can get it. Sanded in Australia, they definitely make it. Any composite, sort of high-end composite place, I imagine, would have it. It's pretty readily available, I think. So, would recommend it. Doesn't wrap rails very well, apparently. I've never tried it, but yeah, apparently it doesn't wrap rails very well because it is quite thick. So you're better off doing like deck inlays or tail patch inlays or something like that. It's a pretty rad material to work with. I got it from, maybe I didn't get it from Shapers. I think I did get it from Shapers Australia. YouTube sucks. That's not my opinion. That's this guy's username. In America, we got wicked loud alarms in case of tornadoes. The cities have like bomb alarms they use. Yeah, that's, somebody else brought that up. So we have our fire station, or our fire brigade here, is volunteer based. So all of our fireys are at work, working at the supermarket, or some of them work for the council, or wherever they work, all over. So they've got day jobs and real lives, you know. So the way we call our firefighters to the station, they have pages, I believe, as well, but also an alarm goes off at the fire station, which is insanely loud. I can hear it at my house, and the fire station is a 10-minute drive away from here, other end of town. And it sounds like, so most Europeans that are visiting here, when they hear it, they think it's an air raid happening, because in Europe it would mean aeroplanes are coming to drop bombs on you. So it sounds like that. So we have alarms like that, but this tornado was, we knew we were having storms that night, but we didn't know, well, they didn't know it, we certainly didn't. But yeah, there was no mention of possible tornado. It just happened, you know. There was just one of them, and it literally like hit a street, and that was it, and then it was gone. It wasn't like places and things were damaged around it. My letterbox blew away, and the greenhouse door came off, because I was kind of on the outskirts of it, you know, but it was really just one street that was hit. We don't really have tornadoes here. It's not a thing. We have cyclones out at sea, like closer to Fiji type of thing, but tornadoes on land, yeah, pretty rare, very rare. In New Zealand, that is. And those alarms aren't much help for me anyway, because I sleep through everything. I've never even felt a real earthquake, because I've slept through every single one. We had one morning I woke up when I was still plastering, and I went to just do my usual routine. So I woke up 10 minutes before I was meant to be at work, and so I rushed down to the bakery to get my morning coffee. And the main street, there was not a soul on it, and the bakery was closed, which made me really mad because there was no coffee. And I was like, what is going on? Everything's shut. So then I went to the job site, brand new house with like builders' fences around it, you know. People should have been there setting up, all the builders, my boss, plasterers, everyone should have been there. No one was there. I was tripping out. So I rang my boss. And the first thing he said when he picked up was, "Where are you? Are you okay? Are you all good?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm at work. Like, where are you? What the hell is going on?" And everybody had evacuated town because during the night there was like a earthquake and a tsunami warning, and so everyone got the alarms or the warnings you get on your mobile phones saying evacuate and grab your things and head to high ground and all the rest. And I'd slept through the whole bloody thing, and nobody had called me. Not that it would have mattered anyway, because I slept through the emergency alarm anyhow. So I just got up, went to get coffee, and went to work, and there was a tsunami warning. So even if there was an alarm warning me of a tornado, I would likely sleep through it anyway. Although I happen to be awake for this one, so maybe not. Abreu. He asks, if it's a very small ding, is the cloth still needed, or just the epoxy will do the job? Good question. So resin is kind of brittle without cloth. It's not very strong resin. It's hard, but it's not particularly strong. So the strength in a repair or in a surfboard or a boat or anything comes from the weave of the fiberglass cloth. Pardon me, it's just the resin that stiffens up and hardens that fiberglass cloth. So without cloth, resin is quite brittle, and that's why I always say that things like Solarez repairs are temporary. They might last a week, they might last half a year, they might last 7 years, who knows, it's just resin. So if it gets hit with something, it'll likely shatter and break, as opposed to fiberglass, which will crack, but it won't explode and shatter, you know, like glass. So it depends on the ding, really. Some dings you can get away with just adding resin, but it's kind of a gamble, depending on the ding, again. So I feel like if you have to think about, does it need cloth? Just add cloth. It's the safest option, and you know it'll last forever if you're adding cloth. Sam, welcome. Welcome. Fear of tsunami is a scary thought. We get hurricanes here, but for some reason the thought of tsunami too seems way more scary. Yeah, tsunamis seem pretty scary. I was awake for one of them, which actually didn't hit here too badly, or badly at all, in fact, but it hit about an hour up north. But that was the closest to us. It hit a town about an hour up north, Whangarei, quite badly. Wrecked boats in marinas, that type of thing. But we all headed to, there's a hill here which overlooks the inlet to our estuary from our main beach. So we all went up this hill to watch, and we saw this, just this single wave kind of roll in, you know, but it wasn't very big, like waist height maybe at maximum. That's all we got, luckily. But yeah, there's a little bit south of here, there's evidence that a huge tsunami hit us a long time ago. There's all these fossilized trees that are all like preserved in the ground, but they're all facing one direction, kind of northwest, I guess. So it would have been a tsunami that came kind of from the south of us and hit our coast and just ripped through, knocking everything down. Some of those videos on YouTube of tsunamis are insane, especially like around Japan and places like that. Yeah, I can't imagine many things scarier than that. What was I talking about? Epoxy. Epoxy resin is weak without fiberglass. Generally, resin is weak and brittle without fiberglass. Cloth, it is hard, like glass, but fragile, like glass. You can get away with only using resin. Can you guys hear the keyboard? You shouldn't be able to, but I feel like you might be able to. You can get away with only using resin on some dings. my general rule is if you have to ask, just use some cloth. That's one of the reasons I'm a bigger fan of solar res than other UV resins for sort of temporary repairs. G'day Seth, how are you? Welcome. Is because at least solar res cuts up fiberglass cloth inside their resin. I've used other brands like Ocean and Earth, not to call them out, but I don't rate their product because it is just pure resin. There's no fiberglass strands in it at all. So solar res is just naturally going to be stronger because it has fiberglass cloth cut up in there. Also, I found that the Ocean and Earth epoxy solar res kind of equivalent, it just took forever to kick. Solar res is like 2 minutes. That Ocean and Earth product was like 20 to 30 minutes, which, yeah, made no sense to me at all. You can hear it. Interesting. Interesting. We can, but no issue. Well, that's good at least. You shouldn't be able to hear it at all, but I'm using this thing called NVIDIA Broadcast, and I had to uninstall it, reinstall it, and it's just not acting the same as it used to. Paul Godfrey, this is the newest video, an unremarkable repair for an unremarkable board. What a title. Great video. When you're sanding and shaping your micro balloon resin before glassing, in your video it looks much easier than when I do it, when it gums up my paper really fast. Is that laminating resin with the micro balloons, or have you added wax? That's a good question, and I haven't spoken about it before, and I'm actually filming a video at the moment on kind of the basics of poly resin, and I didn't think to add this topic into it, so I will definitely make sure to add that because I'm still filming the video. But it depends really on how much micro balloon you're adding to your resin mix. So if you're making a really thick peanut butter type of mix, like almost dry, then you don't need to add wax styrene or wax additive. The micro balloons will kind of act like a wax additive, creating a barrier between the air and the resin. But if you're just mixing, if you were doing like a fin box kind of consistency, so it's still runny, but it's got micro balloons in it, I would add my wax additive to that, because then, yeah, sanding that type of consistency, there's not enough micro balloon to act as a wax additive, so it can remain gummy if you just leave it as a laminating resin. So it's a good question, and I will definitely add it to the upcoming video. Good question. It's going to depend on the thickness of your mix. For a really thick mix, the micro balloons will act as a wax additive. For a runnier mix, you want to add some wax to create a sanding resin. Safest bet is to just always add some wax additive. It's kind of, it doesn't hurt, you know, it's not going to hurt if you add it even in a thick mix. It's just going to thin it out a little more maybe, but you're not adding that much. It's not particularly expensive, so there's nothing worse than trying to sand a repair and it's just gumming up your sandpaper. So I feel like just add it. It makes life way more pleasant. Joe Schmo asks, is a thin resin top coat an option over spray paint versus spray can clear coat? Good question again. It is. You can definitely resin over. So he was talking about this particular video where we... Is this the first one or the second one? I think this is the first one. But basically we started with this mess and we ended with... Where is it? Surely he did a final shot. We ended with this. He's probably more talking about the tail. Or the tail end on the bottom side. So he's basically asking, can we add resin over this paint instead of clear coat? This is just clear coated. And the answer to that is yes, we could. So I could do that paint job and then resin the entire board. I wouldn't just put resin over the paint. You would have to resin the entire board. The issue comes when you need to sand it. And if you sand through your resin coat, you're going to hit paint and you're going to sand that paint away really quickly. And now you're going to have like a weird little touch up to do on your board. Where's that comment gone? It's disappeared. So it has disappeared. Where did that go? So that's why I would clear coat over a job like that, whereas with a restoration type of job, I would want to cloth over my paint. If you cloth over the paint and then add your resin, if you sand through the resin, you're going to hit cloth and you'll see that weave of the cloth and you'll know, okay, don't sand that anymore. And that way you're just touching up resin, you're not touching up a perfectly pristine paint job. I think I have lost that. But that's alright, I've answered the question. I have to find him later. Why did that? Oh, it's because I did the heart thing on it. I'll find that later. That's alright. Sam says, I was looking at resin for my fin box replacement. That's right, you're doing a fin box replacement this morning. Because it's cold here at the moment, UV resin popped into my head, but I'm guessing that's a bad idea, though, for fin boxes. Yeah, for fin boxes, not ideal. Are you doing poly or epoxy, Sam? Because it is possible with poly. If you're doing it with poly, then you can still add a little bit of MEKP, a bit of catalyst to it, and then do your install, and then use your UV light, and anything the UV doesn't reach, at least you've still got that catalyst mixed in there. But for poly, the cold doesn't matter that much anyway, really. You can always warm your resin up a little bit before you mix it. Epoxy, it's more of an issue if it starts dropping kind of below 15 degrees Celsius type of range. YouTube sucks. Have you heard of that gel coat that gels like a viscous slick feeling whenever it's in the water? They use it on high dollar boats. Would that work on a surfboard? No, I don't think so. So it turns slick when it's wet? Have you heard of that gel coat that gets like a viscous slick feeling whenever it's in the water? I'd want the opposite, I feel like. I'd want it to feel grippy when it's wet, not slick. I guess for boats it makes sense because it'd be faster through the water. Is that the idea? I haven't heard of it. But maybe. I've often wondered why we don't gel coat surfboards. People always claim it. Oh, so it's, yeah, okay, it makes it slick so your boat streams through the water. So I guess you could put it on just the bottom side of the board and the rails, but leave the deck as per usual. You'd have wax on it anyway, I guess. Yeah, sounds alright to me. I honestly don't know why we don't use gel coat on surfboards. And people often do say it. They'll bring their board in, they'll say, oh, I think it's just a crack in the gel coat. It's like, well, yeah, less drag. We don't use gel coat. But why? One day, I'll do a board in gel coat just to see what happens. It might be particularly heavy, I'm thinking, because gel coat is quite thick. But if you were doing like a mow, I don't feel like it really matters how heavy a board like that is. Like, if you're doing a 10-foot log, who gives a shit? They're heavy anyway. And who cares if a 10-foot mount? People buy 10-foot epoxy mouls because they're light, but who wants a light mowl? It doesn't make any sense to me at all. It's epoxy. Didn't think it would be a great idea. Yeah, so I wouldn't do it just based on the fact if you fill it with your UV resin, sink your box in, blast it with your UV light, there's going to be so much, like 90% of that resin will never be contacted with the UV light. So it'll just never cure right underneath. So yeah, I wouldn't, Sam. I'd wait. But a trick you can do is get your container of epoxy resin and put it in, like, get a bucket of hot, almost boiling water, and just put your epoxy container in that hot, almost boiling water for 5 minutes or so, and that'll heat the resin up. And then do your mix, and then you can pour it, and then you can even kind of babysit it with a heat gun for a while. It'll thin your resin out, just be wary of that. It'll make it a bit thinner, but it's doable. I do it in a pinch sometimes. If it's really cold and I've got a job I have to get done, I'll just warm that resin first, or just stick the bottle of resin in front of a heater for a little while, something like that, just to warm it up. Join the club, YouTube sucks. Me too. Rory says, what is this? This is the newest video. Great video, thanks. I'm attempting to repair my mal damaged swallowtail. Do you have a video of that? A mal with a swallowtail. That sounds hideous. So I'm guessing he's asking particularly about the points of the swallowtail and repairing them, which I don't. I don't believe I have a video on that as of yet. No, I don't think so. Unless it's in that week-long series somewhere. Maybe. Actually, maybe. Let's just check this before I answer it. Was there? Yeah, there. Yep. There's a fishtail at least. That's kind of the same thing. I don't have a video specifically on swallowtail repairs, but if you check out the week-long series I did at the end of last year, there is an orange fish I repaired in that series. Might be of some help. Easy. This, I knew this would come up again. So that video that I just released, an unremarkable repair for an unremarkable board, that footage is actually really old. It's from when I was filming it at the same time I was filming that week-long series, and I did a what did I do? I did a short series as well, and then I did a members only series as well. So I was filming a lot at the same time. So I was actually sitting on this footage for 4 or 5 months, and that's why in that video I was wearing that gas mask from, like, Soviet Russian gas mask that I brought back from my trip to Australia. And then, of course, as I mentioned in another video, I realized that because a bunch of people commented about it, those old gas masks used asbestos for their filters, and so potentially I was breathing in asbestos while using that mask, which I was looking at it the other day, and I've melted it so I must have had resin on my hands or something, and I've like pulled it off. Not that I've used it in a long time, but I've pulled it off, got resin on that rubber mask, and it's melted it. So interesting to know it's not poly-proof. So it's no longer an airtight mask. So this is the same comment. Hey man, your GP5 mask skit cracked me up. I just wanted to mention that a lot of those old Soviet filters have asbestos leaking out. Hope you took care of that. Also, thanks for your amazing quality videos. Your knowledge is golden. Yew. So appreciate it, definitely. I wouldn't have known if people didn't mention it in these comments. So I'm happy. The ending to that was that I rang a couple of army surplus stores that sell those type of masks and gave them my filter type, and luckily my filter is new enough that it was post asbestos filter, but the guys said they still wouldn't use it. The materials they used after asbestos weren't that great either. So best not to use it. You can buy modern day filters that fit those old Soviet era masks. And yeah, best to just get rid of the original filters. So I've retired that mask. I thought it might make a comeback if I could buy like a new age filter that fits it. But now I've seen that I've melted it on the side with my poly fingers. So it might be a wall hanger from now on. I just have to find a wall to hang it on. This was actually some quite old footage from about the middle of last year. I had filmed a few videos wearing that mask, and others pointed out the same thing. I did check the filter model with some army surplus stores, and thankfully mine was post asbestos. They still recommended not using it though, as the materials that came after. Isn't it crazy they used asbestos? Not that great either. The mask is now officially retired. Cheers. DMAC's a regular commenter revisiting some of the old videos. That is an old video. They are too good not to. When do you apply the clear? When do you apply the clear coat on top of your paint? When it's fully dried, tacky, wet, etc. So for clear coat on paint, tacky. So you don't want it to be cured, because if it cures, then you're going to have to sand it to get adhesion. You don't want it to be wet, because if you add wet paint to wet paint, there's going to be too much paint and you'll get big runs in it. So you want it to be tacked off, kind of like probably touch dry, but you're still a little bit too scared to check if it's touch dry. That kind of stage, and then you can load your clear coat onto it. That is an old one. Tacky is the goal. You probably want your paint touch dry, but still wet enough that you're scared to check if it's touch dry. If that makes sense. Cured, you'll have to sand it before clearing for any kind of adhesion, and wet will end up running. Oh my lord, so hard to use a real keyboard. And what do we got here? This one I was kind of looking forward to, and I'm even pre-prepared here. So Jay here says, awesome videos. For your information, acrylic paint is water-based paint. Some water-based paints, like acrylic, don't dissolve in water once cured. Alright, so this is a subject and a half. You can go deep on paint, and I am not smart enough, and I don't remember enough to go too deep, but it comes up a lot, and I see it most often on online groups like Facebook, even Instagram comments where people are asking, can I paint under my resin, or poly resin for instance, let's say, and there's always comments saying yes you can, but it has to be water based, and this is a mistranslation. So epoxy hates other chemicals being mixed with it, and for this reason, if you're going to be painting under epoxy, you need to be painting with water-based paint. That is true. You don't want to be using any type of solvent-based paint under epoxy. It's not going to end well. So water-based is the way to go. For poly resin though, poly doesn't give a shit. Poly is hardcore, like the Terminator of resin. It doesn't care. So you can use whatever the hell you want under poly. You could pour petrol on your board and then put poly resin over it. It would probably be just fine. Poly resin is hearty. So that answer of it has to be water-based comes from using, or comes from epoxy. For poly, it doesn't count. This particular board was me reviewing Rogue Wave's repair, and he used water-based paint on top of his epoxy. And as Jay here points out, not all water-based acrylics will re-wet when they make contact with water, but it's still not ideal to be using water-based paint on something that is going in the water, because it's, if I was going to paint my desk, for instance, in water-based acrylic, I might spill some water on it, I might spill some coffee on it. Every blue moon it's going to get wet, but a surfboard gets wet a lot and it stays wet a lot. So it's not ideal to use water-based paint on top. He did clear coat it, so there's that, but not ideal. So here's the thing that confuses people. When Jay says, for your information, acrylic paint is water-based paint, this is not accurate. All water-based paint is acrylic. Not all acrylic paint is water-based. So you can get a water-based acrylic, you can get a solvent-based acrylic. So they're not the same thing. And people confuse this. They read the word acrylic and they make the assumption that it's water-based. It is not necessarily water-based. Even if there's some water in it, there's possibly more solvent base in it than water. So basically the way the paint works is you have your color, like your I don't remember what they call them, but we're going to call them pixels because it's the only word I can think of. So we got our color, and then we have a thing for that color to bind to. So that would normally be, and in an acrylic paint, it's an acrylic polymer, which is basically a plastic. It's a liquid plastic. That's why it's not good to breathe in. So the color binds to that liquid plastic, acrylic polymer. And then in that mix, they will add either solvents or water. And so when you spray your paint and it lands on your surface, it's on your wall or what, your surfboard, whatever you're painting, and then that water or your solvent will evaporate, and that will dry out the paint. So some acrylics will have water which will evaporate, other acrylics will have solvents which will evaporate. But the thing that makes them acrylic is the acrylic polymer, which is what the colour is binding to. The I don't remember what they call it, but the water or the solvents that they add to it, they don't really matter when it comes to acrylic. It's the acrylic polymer in the paint. So remember the rule, not all acrylics are water-based, but all water-based are acrylic. And to show you this, we can look at some websites. So this is the paint that I use. I use Molotov spray cans for my repairs and my new boards as well. I believe they're the best paints you can possibly buy. Best bang for your buck. Not as hearty or as good as a two-pot automotive paint, but there's some downsides to two-pot automotive paints for this type of work that these guys make up for. So the paints I use are the premium ones, which are these ones. They're a solvent-based paint. You don't really want to put these under epoxy. You don't really want to spray EPS foam with them. They'll melt it. It's not great. They're a synthetic, basically, which is a solvent-based acrylic, essentially. Like I said, you can get confusing. But let's do that. Let's say water-based acrylic, solvent-based acrylic, or synthetic paint. So these are a synthetic paint, solvent-based, and then they also make a water-based acrylic. So this paint is specifically water-based, so you could use this under epoxy just fine. And if we have a look at these ones, which are very popular, everybody knows about Mountain, MTN. The 94 is very popular, everyone knows about them. If you're going to draw a spray can, you're probably going to draw one of these ones. These are an acrylic or a synthetic paint. I don't know. There we go. Look at that. Synthetic paint right there. It says it. Molotov don't give much detail on this type of stuff. But that is a solvent-based acrylic. But if we go back, you'll notice that they also do a water-based. This is also an acrylic, but it's a water-based acrylic. I don't know what it will say down here. Nothing. There you go. But these are specifically water-based. But they're all acrylic paints. Just some of them are water-based, some of them are solvent-based. So this is a half-truth. Acrylic paints can be water-based. They don't have to be water-based. And even if they have some water in them, they can predominantly be solvent-based. The only thing that makes them acrylic paint is the acrylic polymer, which is what the colour binds to in the paint. And then our water or solvent, or both, a combination of both, that's what evaporates after you've painted your surface, and then your paint dries. So there you go. I'm not going to reply to that comment on this because I feel like you guys don't want to sit there and watch me type such a long answer to a comment, but that I've been waiting to do that one for quite a bit because I see it all the time. So it's important if you're doing poly work. You can buy whatever spray can you want. It really doesn't matter. Poly resin is so amazing. If you're really nervous about it, always do a test patch first. Find something, paint it, put some glass over it, put a hot coat over it, see what happens. You should be fine. Epoxy, much more sensitive. Again, you can do test patches, no stress at all. Yeah, I see it quite often, and it is a really important thing to kind of be able to wrap your head around. Yeah, other than that, what else do I have open here? Nothing. That's my video, so we can close that. That is my... Oh, I did have one which I accidentally got rid of, but there was a guy who asked... I'll have to find his comment again after this, but basically he was watching this video and he noticed the way that I was fixing he specifically said 12:30. So he was pointing out the way I fix tails. And there we go. So he was basically asking why I don't wrap the cloth around the rails, essentially. And is that a weaker way to do it? So what I do generally with tails like this is, you can see I've got my masking tape there. I lay a flat patch. I do the same thing for like fish and things like that, swallowtails, that type of stuff. So I'm going to laminate this patch here. We'll get that all wet out, just like it is in that shot there. And then once that's kicked off, I'll cut it with a razor blade. So we've just got our flat section on the underside of the board. Then I'll flip the board over, and I will do what I've done on this orange fish here, which, there we go. So I'll flip the board over. The underneath is already glassed, yeah. Then I'll flip the board over and I'll glass this area here, and I'll leave these curtains hanging down. I don't try and wrap them under the board. And then after that, I don't cut this one out. I just add my resin coat, or if it's epoxy, I sand it and then sand it away, and then add my resin coat, and then I sand it all with poly. In the case of poly, I sand it all. So the reason I do this is because there's a difference between glassing a shaped blank and glassing a finished tail of a board. So a finished tail of a board is going to have that hard, sharp edge to it, and that hard, sharp edge isn't shaped into the board, into the foam. It's shaped into the resin at the end of the board's glassing procedure. And because it's a 90-degree sharp edge on the tail of your board, you can't wrap fiberglass cloth around a 90-degree sharp angle, because you're going to get air bubbles all through it. So this is really the only way to do it, unless you want to sand that tail super hard and kind of round it out, and then rebuild that sharp edge at the very end, which is perfectly doable as well. Whereas if this were just a foam board and it hadn't been glassed yet, that hard edge hasn't been shaped yet. So in that case, then I would be wrapping this cloth underneath as well, and wrapping that rail fully. So I'll find that person's comment and I'll reply to that as well. It might even have been on this video. I can't remember what video it was on. It was on this video, because he said at 12:30, so it's probably one of the newest ones. There we go. Oh, I did reply to it. Look at that. At the 12:30 mark, I've never seen where, if you're adding cloth, you don't wrap the area. What advantage is there to do it the way you're doing, and also does it create weakness not wrapping the rail? So the rail is still fully wrapped. You're just joining cloth to cloth. Cloth on the underside of the board, and then cloth on the top side coming down, and you're connecting those two edges. Yeah, so there's that. But I actually already replied to his comment as well. No? Alright, something weird's going on. When I was doing all those comments before, there was something weird, like before I started the live stream, something weird was going on. So I'm going to delete that, and I'll get back to him with a comment that actually makes sense. Alright, and if I press enter on this, we should just have that one left, which I've already answered here, and I'll type him a response after. So I think that's it, you guys. We're done. Done for another week. And like I said, I'm working on that new video on poly. I started filming it. I actually got pretty much all of it filmed, but then the board I was working on was just, the repair was too complicated for like a beginner's guide to poly resin. It was too much. So I started filming it again with a much simpler board, and tomorrow I'll add another board into the mix, but it's still quite a simple repair. So for people that are learning the basics of poly, I feel like we're better off starting with basic repairs, not adding foam, not doing big paint jobs, anything like that. Just the most basic of repairs. So yeah, that's on its way. Hopefully I'll get all the footage to that finished maybe this week, maybe the week after. And then it should be pretty easy and quick to edit because it's one that I'm narrating as I work. It won't be much voiceover stuff. So yeah, it shouldn't be too far away. And in the meantime, if any comments start building up again, then we'll do this again. I'll try and do these more regularly now so we're not left with so many comments and they don't take so long. Nice one, guys. I hope you're well. And we'll see you soon. To the members, I'll try and get another video out for you guys this week. We've still got those 2 boards to look at. That Wayne Parks gun and the Roger Hall hot curl as well. So we might have a look at them this week. And aside from that, that's it. Have fun, guys. Have a good week. Take it easy. Stay safe. And we'll see you later.